Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest Cindy Markey, author, keynote speaker, life coach, and entrepreneur.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Ann. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with...
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. We'd like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we're pleased to have Cindy Markey, and she's an author, keynote speaker, life coach, and entrepreneur. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. So, Cindy, you said you were escaped from a religious organization. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. When I was a small child, my parents joined a high control religious group. I was about the age of 2, so I was raised in that environment until about the age of 20, when I finally got enough courage to decide that that was not the path for me, that I didn't want to continue down that road. And I kind of planned my escape and had to figure out this big, scary world on my own. So that's where I started my story with you guys.
You know, you use the word escape. I mean, was that literally an escape?
It's exactly how it feels. You
Really?
are escaping from a lifestyle and a mindset.
Wow. Well, I know you mentioned that you were shunned, and when I hear the word shunned, I always think of either the Mennonites or the Amish, because I mean I've heard that term in their space as being shunned.
Yes.
Is that exactly the same thing in yours?
It is something very similar. I'm not familiar with the Amish or the Mennonites and how far they go. I know they use that term, but what I experienced myself was when you decide that you're going to leave that environment or that religion that you've been raised in, or if they decide to kick you out, which that term is called disfellowshipped, you know that that means that everyone in that organization, including your family, will no longer have anything to do with you. They won't speak to you. You're not welcome in their home. They won't call you. They won't come to your wedding. They won't see their grandchildren. You just pretty much are dead in their mind. It's a complete shunning and a cutting off of them from you. Which is why I called it an escape, right? Because it's a difficult thing. And one of the things I remember thinking to myself was, all right, I already knew that that was what was going to happen. In your mind, you realize it and you know. But then when you actually take that step and you walk away and the reality of what that means hits you, it's like walking into a brick wall. And all of the emotions start to flow and you're like, wow, you know, first you question, what was I thinking? You know, wait, you know, I'm not ready for this. And then you go into shock and it's like, well, really, how long are they going to keep this up? You know, it's just unfathomable that it could really happen. You're hoping that they'll cave and not really do it, but they do.
Well, it's kind of like you say, you think about doing it, and you've got yourself prepared.
Uh-huh.
So once you do it, but then you get out away, and you really find out how alone you are, and you thought you were prepared, but you really had no idea what it was really going to be like until you got there.
Yes, and I think that especially for people who were born into or raised from a very small age, right? It's a lot harder on them because it's all they know. It is still difficult for people who join as an older adolescent or a young adult or maybe middle-aged people. It is still just as difficult when they leave, but many of them still have family or friends or networks of people outside that they had established before they joined, where people who are raised into it and grow up in that environment, it is all you know. And when I say it's all you know, that's exactly all you know. Because even though you might go to school and interact with people outside of that organization, you are not allowed or permitted to have friends outside of that religious organization. You're not allowed to join the sporting activities. You're not allowed to be in the school plays or go to the school dances or have any of the childhood experiences so that you're interacting with people. You're really confined and isolated and kept in a bubble. And so all of the mindsets, all of the beliefs, all of the conditioning seems very normal to you because everyone around you is doing the same thing. So you only interact with that small group of people. I myself was growing up in a small rural community of about 400 people. So you're already in a small community. And then when you're isolated even further, your bubble is really small. So that's all you know. And when you leave, you are not prepared for what the real world is about. And on top of not knowing that, you had already been conditioned to believe that everything outside of the bubble you were in was under the influence of Satan, right? Or the dark forces, and that they were not good people. So you were already conditioned to be afraid. And then you come out into a world that you don't know. So then you're really out of your comfort zone.
How long did it take you to overcome once you left?
Well, I improved in stages, right? So I would say maybe the first 3 or 4 years, I was kind of what I called in shock mode. And so I was surviving. You know, there's a difference between thriving and surviving. And I kind of feel like those first 3 years, especially the first year or two, you're in shock and you're just taking one day at a time. And just the normal everyday things kind of helped get me going. You know, you have to have a job. So that gave me something to go and do every day. And you start to meet people and you start to do things. And then you start to read things that you hadn't been exposed to before. And you start going to different events, trying to find, you know, how to just interact with people. And then you start to trust certain people. Unfortunately, you sometimes trust the wrong people because you don't know, everything is brand new to you. So I would say the first couple of years, I went through a phase of disbelief and anger because I kept trying to convince, especially the family, your core family, you're trying to justify why you're leaving. You want them to understand why you leave. You want them to see what you see and try to convince them why what they're doing and what behavior they're displaying doesn't make sense. No one else in the world would act like this. Why can't you see this? And the more you try to get them to understand, and the more they're not, there's that resistance, right? And so you basically continue to drive yourself crazy. And you relive the event over and over, which keeps you kind of anchored in the past. Instead of looking forward and taking those steps, you're kind of paralyzed because you're just trying to get somebody to hear you, get somebody to understand. You're trying to crack that shell. And unfortunately, you can't make people see something when they're not ready. Or if they're still under the mind control of the organization, you can't force them out of it. And so you have to go through these mental calisthenics, right, in your mind, trying to figure out and be okay with the decision you made, realizing you're going to have to let go of people and everything that meant anything to you in order to survive. It's either you're going to drown in that and they're going to win ultimately because you couldn't survive without them, or you're going to have to figure out, I have strength and courage, and you know that you did, or you would have never been able to take those first steps anyway, right? You have to have inner strength and inner courage to say, this is not my truth, and this is not who I am, and you will not oppress me anymore. And you may not realize exactly those words at the time, but when you look back, you know that's exactly what you were saying. This is not who I am, and I need to be myself, regardless. I need my freedom, and so you embark. And once you find that inner strength and that inner courage, then you start taking those steps. And I think that took me probably about 3 years to finally get to that point.
So I'm guessing once you left, you were really striving for acceptance from someone.
Yes, you do not have a lot of self-confidence or a lot of self-worth. You have no self-love. You don't even know how to start developing any of those assets because you were never trained to think about how to go about improving yourself. College and vocational schools were not encouraged. And what I've come to discover over the many years of being out is each little group within the organization, each congregation may have handled things a little differently. You know, everybody followed the bigger picture, but then the local teams, so to speak, you know, may handle some things differently. And in some congregations, people would have been disfellowshipped or ostracized or reproved if they chose to go to vocational school or college. Other ones might be a little more forgiving in that manner and allow people to do that, kind of marking them as someone who wasn't really the best person to hang out with, but they weren't bad enough to kick out. So from region to region, you might find people that did have further education, but then there were others that didn't. But you were never encouraged to read anything other than what they provided. You certainly weren't supposed to improve yourself, to question, especially women and children. You know, women were never allowed to be the leaders. Women and children were really to be seen and not heard and just be obedient to the husband and father or leaders of the group. So as a woman, a young woman, you felt like your voice didn't matter. And so now you're out in this bigger world, and even when you get a job, you kind of are afraid to speak up. You're afraid to be a leader. You're afraid to question. And it's just really difficult to do that.
How did you make it in the corporate world?
Well, that came later. You know, I said that you develop skills and you advance throughout. You know, I went to counseling and I did a lot of self-help. I took leadership classes. I did go to school. I took some community college classes, and just through meeting people that eventually became good friends of mine, I did learn skills, and I learned how to find who I was authentically. And once you start doing the deep inner work and you start understanding what is your beliefs, who am I, that self-confidence comes automatically, and the self-worth comes with that. And when you really discover who you are and what your beliefs are, and you become anchored in who you are, you really don't get swayed too much. You're not thrown about like you're really anchored. And so that self-help and the self-development really starts to kick in. And when I became an employee in the corporate world, you know, I started out as a receptionist and moved my way up. And as you start taking those leadership classes and you start learning and you start putting your toe in the water, right? And you start becoming a team member and you value the team that, that you're working with, you become a little more courageous each time. And so by the time I got to be, you know, a senior manager, you know, many years had gone by, 20 plus years had gone by. And so you just take one step at a time and it gets stronger as you go.
Yeah, and so you help other people through this, right?
I'm sorry?
You help other people try to get through this.
I do now, yes, I do. You know, when I left, I didn't have a community of people to help me. There was no internet for me to even, you know, find other groups. So yes, one of my passions now is helping people who want to leave or who have left and just don't have those skills. We've developed a online private Facebook group that it exceeds over 7,000 people right now.
Wow.
And there are many of us that join together to help monitor and mentor the group and teach them some skills. And one of the things that's really nice about our group is we have now for the first time recognized that everybody's path to who they are and what they believe can be multifaceted. Just because it's not right for me doesn't mean it's not right for you. And learning to not be judgmental and to have open minds is a new skill for many of them, because what they need to realize is when you decide that you're going to leave that organization and that control group, you physically leave, but that doesn't mean that mentally you're leaving behind a lot of the narcissistic behaviors that you became accustomed to. And you have to make a conscious effort to reprogram your mind and your subconscious. You have to learn how to get rid of the old programs that you don't want and how to put in the new behaviors and beliefs and patterns that you want to incorporate and help yourself become that better person.
It's all about the mind.
It is all about the mind. And when I work with people, I can't speak for all coaches because they all have their own way, right? One of the things that I always try to help them understand is how your mind works. You have to understand how your mind works in order to understand how you got where you were to begin with. You know, from the ages of 0 to 5, your mind is really open. You know, it doesn't really have a filter there because you're supposed to be around people who love and protect you, right? You know, I'm not saying that people who are in this organization on purpose want to screw up their kids, because I don't know any parent that would say, let me see how I can mess up my kid, right? They're doing it because at that moment in time, they really believe this and they believe that they're instilling the right things. Nobody does it on purpose. And that's one of the things that we, excuse me, have to learn when we leave is let go of that anger and that resentment, because we did the same things at a certain point in time. We believed it as well. And we were doing it from a place of what we thought was love. So when you look at those people that are still there and you wonder, how can they do this to me? Well, it's because that's what they really believe. They're still under that mind control, and they can't see anything different. So when we learn how to change those mindsets and those programs that are running in the back of our mind, then we can make personal growth amongst ourselves, better choices, and we can then share that with other people. So when I joined this group of people that are in this Empowered Minds for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the things that we also do, or we did before COVID, was we would have little seminars or conferences in different locations throughout the country. And a few core people would get together with these people in person, and we would tell our stories. We would share the skills that we learned and what we've done to help us move on and change our belief systems. And so one of the leaders in the group said, hey, let's write a book. You know, let's put some of our stories together so that we can share not only our story, because everybody's story is a little different, even though it's all the same, but different, right?
Right.
So everybody tells their story, but then each person tells the path that they took to help them thrive in life and succeed and find happiness. Because again, everybody's path is different. So our goal was, let's tell these stories so that we can resonate with someone in the group. And then maybe what one of us did will help them find what works for them. And so that's when we wrote this book, which is called Fear to Freedom.
Okay. Great.
There's that little book there. So it's available on Amazon, paperback, hardback, or electronic.
So, what would your advice be to someone that is in the situation you were in?
Someone who was still in, or someone that's in the situation now?
In the situation now that's wanting to try to get out or thinking about getting out.
I would tell them that if they have any little seed of doubt, follow that instinct, right? if there isn't anything that I've learned more, is that I should follow my instincts and follow my intuition, right? Everybody has that knowing. That comes from your heart. I've taken classes and I'm still getting certified in the Heart Math Institute, and they talk about the heart intelligence and how your heart can lead you just like your mind can. And if you have that little twang telling you you need to get out, you do. And that there really is life outside of what they're telling you. You can survive, and that there is happiness and possibilities outside the organization. And there's many people out here wanting to help you, and they will become your family. And your family doesn't have to be blood. Your family can be who you choose.
Okay. So, Cindy, how can our listeners reach out to you?
I have a Facebook page, Cindy Markey. I also have a website called cindymarkey.com, and they could reach out to me on any of those platforms.
Okay.
I think there's a website called feartofreedom.ca, because it was published out of Canada. And if they go there, they would find all of the ways that they can purchase it. But here in the US, it is on Amazon, paperback, hardback, or electronic ebook.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on today. Really enjoyed hearing your story. I think you're really doing something good.
Thank you.
Group, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on and meeting both you and Lori.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.